thing was this, as I said, this is a brilliant attempt, but there has been work around Ambedkar and there is exhaustive material on that. It's very important that we focus on annihilation of caste. And what I want to say is, this is a very brilliant introduction that you write, and you are the best person to take it across to an audience which hasn't read it. It's meant for privileged caste, as you said. But this should just be the beginning of something which has to be much more exhaustive. Because as I said, that the caste travels in multiple spaces at a very enlightening speed and affects us at various spheres. So, and that would require exhaustive kind of work, which is there. I thought what is the brilliant part of this book is your obsession with Gandhi, and it is good. Why it is good is because it kind of dismantles what kind of ideals we celebrate. And
he stands in the way. Yeah. He stands in the way of understanding Ambedkar. I mean, since we are here in Bombay, I just want to say one more thing, which is another part of the book. I mean, of the introduction as well as Annihilation of Caste, a brilliant part of the Annihilation of Caste is Ambedkar's conversation with communists and with socialists. And on the back of the book, there's this wonderful quote where he says the caste system is not merely a division of labor, it is also a division of laborers. So, in 1927 was at the great Mahat Satyagraha, and in 1925 was when the Communist Party of India was first formed. And Dange was one of the great Brahmin trade union leaders. He led the Guinea Kamgad Union strike. Now, a large number of those workers were Mahars, the same caste that Ambedkar came from. And they were only given lower paid jobs in the spinning department, because in the weaving department the workers had to hold a shuttle in their mouths, and the spit of the Dalits was supposed to pollute the product, you can imagine. So Dange and Ambedkar suggested to Dange that the equality within workers should be part of the strike, and Dange refused. And so that began the great split between the Dalit movement and the communist movement, which continues till today, and it's a very, very, very sad thing, because it's depleted both, I would say, in terms of just understanding, in terms of the understanding that they could have provided each other, So,
what do you think in present times is the implication of this?
Well, in present times, I think that even here that communist parties, including the Maoist and Naxalite parties, are largely led by Brahmins, because they are the people of the book, and so are communists. But I do think that the danger of I've written about this in a great amount of detail in the introduction, but the danger of embracing liberalization and globalization, because it leads to urbanization and the breaking of the traditional caste-ridden Indian village, comes with a great danger. So there is a description of how caste and capitalism form a very unique ally, and to not have a critique, and I don't mean just of crony capitalism, but I'm saying to not have a really structural critique of capitalism is very, very dangerous for the Dalit movement, and for the communists to not have a critique of what we call Brahmanism just renders it meaningless in India. I say in this essay that when Mao spoke to his guerrilla army, he said a single spark can light a prairie fire. But in India, we don't have a prairie. We have a labyrinth. We have all these firewalls, which are all based on caste, and this poor little single spark is just lost in this labyrinth, coming up against firewall after firewall. So we have to come up with our own version of resistance, you know. We just can't import things from other places and expect it to work because we have this caste system here, and unless it is the primary basis on which we understand how our society works, only the very, very privileged, can go around saying, I don't believe in caste, you know. And many intellectuals have, especially left intellectuals, have just made it what I call a project of unseen, you know, where the census doesn't have anything to do with caste, and people can write about identity and culture and all of this without just mentioning caste at all. I mean, half a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, you know, that's it.
I think even in Annihilation of Caste, Ambedkar, in fact, as you said, there is exhaustive engagement with this so-called socialist. At some point he says that would you assume that economic equality would bring social equality, isn't it? And that he doesn't see possible. And this obsession with economic equality, he says, doesn't apply to India, because every capitalist is running after some priest or some god all the time, so you cannot give this logic. But I would like to again come back to Gandhi, and you very nicely put how Gandhi is liked by all, from Narendra Modi to Beatles to anything. You just be everywhere, right? From alternative cultures. Yeah. Now, but I think Gandhi, of course, you introduced this tribal question. I'm kind of hovering around the same, but the tribal question, the Adivasi question. Hind Swaraj is a very seminal kind of contribution on indigenous sovereignty, you know. Indigenous sovereignty. Hind Swaraj is a text on people's freedom. It's all vacuous, what people we don't know. But it serves well for someone who is really concerned about nature. You know, these days all environmentalists talk about Gandhi, right? So as I said, I mean, I really find it difficult to find good things about Gandhi. But there is so much being dragged. You know, there's these environmentalists argue that Gandhi gives a picture. So is there parallel between if Gandhi is saffron, mildly, and then does this saffron can be easily converted into all these alternative ideologies of, you know, being concerned toward environmental causes and so on? How does this work here?
Actually, you know, I think though Gandhi did say some very interesting things. I mean, I don't want to. The one place where I will give Gandhi credit, and I have given him credit in this, is that he did see the seed of cataclysm in this kind of Western ideas of development. You know, he did see the destruction and the way it would strip the earth. Though he wasn't himself that much of an environmentalist or, you know, that interested in those things. But I think, Hind Swaraj, I really don't know how anyone takes it seriously, because it's just hilarious. It's a hilarious document, you know, where this goes on about, the British Parliament is a sterile woman and a prostitute, lawyers are prostitutes, doctors are prostitutes. Prostitutes, actually, I have a lot of time for, but anyway. But then there's this whole thing about how India is the greatest civilization and no one can teach India anything. And then there's also a very worrying part where he describes India as being bounded by these Hindu pilgrimage sites. You know, but then says, but you know, like in the manner of a good host, we must be nice to everybody and all that. But on the question of, I think on the question of Adivasis, though Ambedkar, I mean, I have critiqued him about the language that he used and the way he called it. It was very similar to the language Gandhi used about Dalits, you know, very, very similar. But Gandhi was not any great admirer of them either. You know? I mean, he also called them savages. He said that Santals are the only people who are as bad as the Kafirs, which he used to call the black Africans, you know. And if you read David Hardiman's book, you see how, you know, even when there were people who, there was a big a massacre of Adivasis, in a region, in a princely state of Gujarat, and Gandhi just never used to engage with anything that didn't have to do with the British. So it was just ignored. The Congress, Gandhi, all of them ignored it. So, but I must say that I certainly have, I certainly have views on the idea of Adivasi homelands. I certainly have views, even though I am aware that an organization like the Narmada Bachao Andolan did not take cognizance of caste. But I am a very great admirer of the argument against the Big Dam, and I think it's a very profound argument and a very important argument. But how it should be fought, because I think it's the basic unit for corporate capitalism, that. So I just feel that the way we define, for example, the way we define what is oppression and what are these battles we are fighting, from the perspective of women, from the NGOs cannot be dismissed. At the same time, there is a very important critique of the role Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, all these things that played historically, even in the anti-apartheid movement, in the civil rights movement, in Indonesia. So at individual moments they do good things, but what is it that they want? What is it that they are looking for? We have to understand that. It's not that we have to become people who cut off everybody's head like who steps out of line. But we have to understand how the game is being played. I think it's very, very important to understand that.
This NGO question, because as you said, we have looked at multiple strategies. These NGOs actually serve, given the kind of state we have and given the kind of NGOs that the state promotes. If you look at the rural cooperatives, all are state funded. These are kind of NGOs which state funds, subsidize and so on. So these serve as sites of strategies for them. So it's not. So this has to be somewhere broken up and brought out. So that because otherwise it's just kind of polarized.
No, I think there are different kinds of NGOs, and an NGO which is funded by Vedanta, is a different matter from an NGO that is state funded or actually. So you have to. But the main thing is not to become like mullahs, saying, oh, this person is a sinner and this person is a saint. But we have to understand the role of the dice. We have to understand the larger agendas of people. And we all can't be pure. None of us can be. So that's not the point. The point is not to go around. And I think one of the greatly debilitating things that Gandhi did to Indian politics was to bring in the question of purity. Like you have to eat goat curd and then a loincloth and not have sex, and otherwise you're a bad person. So it debilitates the imagination. That's not necessarily the only way to do politics. We can also be bad people and do politics.
Last quick one, there is in Ambedkar. There are a variety of scholars who take him around on the class question. He appears as a socialist. At times he appears as someone who is more concerned about freedom, and by freedom he also means the right of economic exercise of becoming rich. Right? So he's not necessarily anti-capitalist society. What he would talk about then therefore is maybe a capitalist society with possible morals of justice and welfare and so on. And given the newer wave of some Dalit intellectuals talking of possibilities of capitalism for balance, for Chandraman Prasad and this making of Tiki and so on. So I'm sure you also, how do you see this game of...
I see it in two ways. One is that I think it's really high time we all stop thinking that Dalits are just some homogeneous mass who has to have one opinion about everything. So like everybody else, there are capitalists and communists and BSP, and that's great. I mean, I certainly am not among those who believe that the corporate neoliberal agenda is going to bring anybody any kind of equality. But within that, when you look at what is going on, I think that Dalits are more of a right to be, to at least have some capitalists and millionaires and all of that. You know, it's not, you can't just say, oh no, just wait for the communist revolution. You know, that'll amount to what the communists said to women. You know, just hang on, and after the revolution we'll see about you. You can't have that, you know, so.
Further linked to the question of caste and the morals of charity in our indigenous Hindu culture, if you also look at who is really engaged, the corporates that are engaged in giving most money, there are very few Hindu corporates actually. It's Azim Premji and the Tatas. So this is
they like
also...
to build temples, no? I mean, there's a quote here about the Birla saying, we don't actually believe in all this, but we like to keep people religious, so we build these temples and so on. But yeah, I mean, now it's come to a stage where you don't know, I mean, corporate capital doesn't have a country, you know. So the Tatas, the Ambanis, they are, you know, instituting chairs in Harvard and Stanford, sending out millions. The Bill Gates Fund is working here, you know, it's all, it keeps us on our toes, you know, and you have to look at things through so many multiple filters, you know, and it's not easy, but we have to do it.
Now I think the audience should be having some questions, so it will be over to some questions, and I want Sharmila, if you can help, unless you want to begin with a question. He has one mic and there's somebody can handle the mic, and there's one hand I see there.
Hi ma'am, just a couple of questions. Firstly, there's very little mentioned in our school textbooks on the social realities of caste discrimination. What is the manner in which you would recommend school textbooks to introduce such topics and their social realities so as to educate us better? And the second question is, considering that the BJP draws most of its electoral strength on from upper caste Hindus, if a Modi-led BJP government were to come to power later this year, are there any specific or additional challenges that people from the lower caste would face either in the short term or the long run?
First of all, one of the things that I'm trying to do is to change the language of saying upper caste and lower caste. You know, I mean, in my essay I talk of privileged caste and subordinate caste. That's very important for us to understand power, you know, because upper suddenly starts sounding as if it has some other thing. About your question about school textbooks, well, I mean, I would say the simple answer to it is that people should read Ambedkar. They really should. I mean, if they won't prescribe them in classrooms, then maybe out of classrooms. But people should read Ambedkar, you know. And one of the efforts of this book and many of us is to just try and make that possible. But I also, having said that, want to say that we mustn't turn Ambedkar into another holy cow, you know. He was a brilliant man with some brilliant arguments, some flaws, some things we would like to argue about, and that would be the greatest tribute to him, you know, not to turn him into a, you know, not to condemn him to purity in some way. The question about if the Modi-led BJP came to power, you know, a great part of my introduction has to do with the ways in which the Hindu liberals and the Hindu rights had jockeyed for this Dalit constituency right from the early 20th century or the turn of the century onwards. And you see that it still plays out today, whether it's them conducting these Ghar Wapsi sort of ceremonies in the forest to make Adivasis return home, which is so ironic. You're trying to tell an autochthonous tribe that has lived there for centuries to return home to Hinduism, which is much newer. But I think what we will see is something which already started in the 1940s, as partition loomed on the horizon, the sort of Sanskritization and the Hinduization of Dalits, which I think is something that really made Ambedkar despair, because we haven't spoken about it, and I don't want to start that discussion now because it'll take a long time, but after what was called the Pune Pact, where basically Ambedkar was forced to give up his demand for a separate electorate, Gandhi started this whole temple entry movement with the Harijan Sevak Sangh at the front of it. And the Harijan Sevak Sangh was not allowed to have any Harijans in it. I mean, Harijan is an obnoxious word, but I'm just saying that was his word. But Ambedkar was so worried about this kind of false embrace, pulling people back into the temples from where the whole system of caste began. And this kind of Hinduization is happening at a tremendous pace now, both within Adivasi cultures as well as amongst Dalits, So, in a way, it perpetuates caste, but makes them stay within the fold of Hinduism in the servants' quarters and pits people one against the other. You see, now with what we are in for is how are people traditionally held on to power by making everyone else fight, and that is what is going to happen, and that has happened a lot in the Dalit movement, just pit them against each other, So that is the answer to that question.
Lots of hands. So, okay.
I think one of your observations, my question is to Arundhati. One of your observations need to be checked or rather corrected factually. You refer to the textile strike of 1928 called by Ambedkar and others. See, in the demands, the charter of demands for the strike, this demand that the untouchables should be given employment in weaving department, that was mentioned, that was very well there. But it is quite true that particular demand was not the priority of the other economic demands of the priority. But that demand, at the instance of Dr. B R Ambedkar, was included. Because he also led not a very big union, but he also led a small union which was a part of the strike earlier. Then subsequently so happened that Dr. Ambedkar thought that particular demand is not a priority of the strike. Then he withdrew from the strike. Not that Ambedkar refused to include that demand. So that is the factually correct.
Yeah. The thing is that rift went on for a long time after that. It continued unto the elections later, and it was a very unpleasant exchange between them.
We'll take a couple of questions and then answer. I'm just going by one from the left and one on the right. Sharmila, Okay, this person with the mic there. Yeah.
Good evening, ma'am. Now, Ambedkar in his speeches and even in his books has constantly referred to, has constantly told the Dalits to convert to Buddhism. Now, what happens is that when people from the lower class they convert to another religion, the institution of caste still exists, and this has been seen in the case of Dalit Christians, and even in other religions, caste has maintained its significance. So, wouldn't it have been better if Ambedkar had actually concentrated on bringing in internal reforms in Hinduism and given more push to that, rather than pushing for, conversion? Where what would have been, what do you think would have been the better tool to fight against caste?
One from the left there. Excuse me, Mike. Wait a second. There's somebody else who has been raising their hand there. Please, no, give it to him. Yeah, it's a lottery. Yeah, and there's right. Yeah, depending on who he sees.
Hello, ma'am. It's more of a doubt and clarification that I would like to have.
Put closer to the mic.
It's more of a doubt and a clarification that I intend to have with myself. The first thing is that when we talk about the Annihilation of Caste, and that was written in 1936, and afterwards when we talk about in 2014, let's say, it's a lot of a gap that we have traveled for even for a Dalit community as well. There have been most of our political parties, they take it as a pride, as we say that Brahmins have a pride for themselves, Dalit to have a pride for their caste. But the one thing that we talked about, the homogeneity of a Dalit, is not what we generally talk about. If we talk about the Dalit in a heterogeneity way, it's also having like annihilation of caste in what way? Like if you see the hierarchy of a Dalit, what comes in the down and what comes in the upper thing. So in that sense, what do we need to understand with the context of this? Should we talk about, okay, this is what we have been oppressed, this is how the historical things have gone through. But if for a Dalit to understand, okay, I am a Dalit, and this is what I see, there is a subjugation and discrimination among the Dalit communities as well. Then where does the Ambedkar's point of argument this comes into the picture when we talk about in the present day?
Answer that. Okay, on the Buddhist things and about this Buddhism, how caste kind of persists. I think Ambedkar's approach, there is a connection I see from 1936 to 1956, and I'm not as familiar with the Buddha and the Dhamma as a text. I find it a very difficult text to read, and I've read it in parts. And I was particularly interested, especially after listening to Aishwarya Kumar's paper on the idea of Vichcheda. Vichched is there's a kind of a traditional idea which has been debated in the Upanishads and in the Buddhist texts earlier to that. Vichcheda is a concept of which comes from also shunyata and annihilation, of negation. And Ambedkar poses the question, is the Buddha negating life? And he talks about how kind of, and in Annihilation of Caste, he also uses this word living death. How for a lot of Hindus and Dalits as well, who call them, if you live with caste, it's basically you're a walking carcass as far as he's concerned. So for him it was about a rebirth, and if this rebirth involved embracing a religion which discards caste. And if you see the 22 vows of Dr. Ambedkar, he is saying, I will not, it's all about negation. I will not do this. I will not accept the Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshwara. I will not accept the Brahman. I will not. So he moves into something, but yes, the Buddhists, later the Buddhists, have been surrounded by others who practice caste. So it becomes difficult not to practice caste when everybody else around you is practicing caste. Ambedkar's call towards the renewal of Buddhism was not only for Dalits. It was not about practicing a religion in a religious sense. He thought of religion as sacred morality. Of course, Arundhati and I had a discussion about this morality business. He said morality is a difficult thing, but for him, it was a moral code that helps you not do the kind of violence you would habitually do with somebody. Not do the kind of violence with which, the subtle violence with which Suryakant Bhagavate's book opens, where somebody can, with entitlement, sit on a vehicle and then just say, where is this other guy? You know, the kind of entitlement with which that happens. So that caste persists in other religions is because caste, these religions are surrounded by caste. If that could be an answer to the question. And to the other question, I'll give it to you.
I won't do it, but I wanted to read one of the footnotes in my essay. See how a writer like Ismat Chugtai, a Muslim, feminist, progressive writer, and you should, there's a short story of hers in which she describes a sweeper, a Dalit woman. It is so dismaying, and yet even today it's translated proudly by feminists and they don't. Okay, I'll read it to you. It's a description from a short story called A Pair of Hands. And this is the text. Gori was her name, the feckless one, and she was dark like a glistening pan on which a roti had been fried, but which a careless cook had forgotten to clean. She had a bulbous nose, a wide jaw, and it seemed she came from a family where brushing one's teeth was a habit long forgotten. The squint in her left eye was noticeable despite the fact that her eyes were heavily cold. It was difficult to imagine how, with a squinted eye, she was able to throw darts that never failed to hit their mark. Her waist was not slim. It had thickened, rapidly increasing in diameter from all those handouts she consumed. There was nothing delicate about her feet which reminded one of a cow's hooves, and she left a coarse smell of mustard in her wake. Now this is a progressive Muslim woman writer, and nobody even points out, look, what is this, what is this, what is wrong with all of us, and it's an imagination, because that in any case, the chances are that a laboring body is more beautiful than a body that's been sitting and eating pan in some bed, But the prejudice just comes out in the most unbelievable ways, and we don't even, it doesn't even cause a blip on the ECG, It's presented to us as a celebratory thing, the translation of this short story. I was just shocked. So, I myself am not a Hindu. As I said, I grew up in a Syrian Christian family, but not a very religious one. And yet, everybody around you practices caste. And when I wrote The God of Small Things, firstly, I got into trouble with the Marxist Party because it is about this tension between the Marxists and Naxal and Dalit and all that. And then I had people coming, I grew up in that village, right? Those were my friends that I was writing about. And people telling me, no, you don't understand. It just can't happen. It just can't happen that a Syrian Christian woman and a parliament can make love. It can't happen. And I was taken to court for corrupting public morality, by 5 lawyers who basically just photocopied the last chapter, which was so offensive to them, and sent it to court. I was in court for 10 years. Every time the hearing came up, the judge would say, each time this case comes before me, I get chest pains. I would postpone it. But these are the prejudices. It's not just about atrocities and killings and beatings, and it's just this is the air we breathe.
There's a question there. The woman in the
Yes.
One second. One second. I don't know who has it. This woman here. She has questioned it. Yeah.
Mine is not a question, it is just a comment. When we are talking about annihilation of caste, I think we need to take serious note of, the most profound contribution that social revolutionary starting from Phule to Ambedkar and Shahu made about the link between caste and gender, and how gender violence is what is the most crucial factor in keeping caste alive. And I think that we have to really give a lot more importance to this aspect of their writings, and also see how we can have an organic kind of link between Dalit activists and gender activists. to eliminate both these obnoxious hierarchies, caste and gender?
That's in the book actually, quite a lot about gender and caste and Ambedkar's whole engagement with the Hindu Code Bill and also about Pule and, it is there, you're absolutely right.
There was another person who was about to ask a question. Can I see the question? Yeah, please.
And this is, I just would like to, how will conversion into another religion, particularly into Islam, will it reduce this caste oppression or caste violence, particularly in the context of Meenakshipuram in Tamil Nadu, where large number of Dalits converted into Muslims, and even that former Prime Minister Vajpayee ran in and it became a big news. That's my question.
Then can we take one more question, and there will be here there are two hands with the one mic, so yeah. So who has the mic has power.
So, if you, that's one way of looking at history. If you see like how Gandhi, kind of thwarted the anti-caste movement, like anti-caste system movement. But in the same way, if one looks at history, then Ambedkar's stress on urbanization, or he had justification for not giving too much power to villages, is probably responsible for the kind of exploitation we see in Indian villages and in the forests today. That's my question. That's also can be seen as a way of looking at Ambedkar's contribution. I know he had justification for not giving too much power to the villages, but still.
Okay. And before I get Arundhati to answer, I'm just going to say those of one more question. Yeah. Okay. One more question, and people raising two hands. Where's the mic? The thing is, I've been seeing these hands much before you grab the mic. So can I ask the mic to be passed to the person in the front here? Okay, that's very generous of you. And let me tell you, after this, those who want to buy the books are available for a reduced price of 400 rupees, and there are also some posters up for sale. Those who want to buy it, and those who want to get it signed by Arundhati can come here and also ask their question, because we can't keep taking questions, more and more questions, so there should be many. So last question over there.
My question to Arundhati is when you introduce something, so you obviously know about the introduction of your subject or the object. Now you are introducing the Annihilation of Caste, that text of Ambedkar, which is in my interpretation about this particular text is it is less a text, but it is more an introduction of a radical movement. It has the essence of a movement. So when you are writing the introduction of this the Annihilation of Caste, so was there an element of that movement, the larger movement which Ambedkar was talking about, that how crucial it is to annihilate the caste from the Indian society in order to make it more equitable, more just. So was that element in your writing when you are writing the introduction of this particular book? And because this particular text is going to be distributed and will read by the larger public now. So will that the element of movement in your introduction when you are writing it?
The first question about the conversion to Islam, I think Ambedkar considered it for a long time, but he also suffered at the hands of Islam, also got beaten up by Muslims for drinking from water from a tank. And when partition happened, even though in 1939, when the British basically declared India to be at war without asking any Indians, and the Congress resigned from all the ministries, Ambedkar and Jinnah together separated the day of deliverance, But and Ambedkar was not against partition. But for example, after partition, the Pakistan government declared the Balmikis to be emergency services, and they refused to let them come across because who was now going to clean the drains and bathrooms there, So the conversion to Islam, though here I've quoted Jyotiba Phule, about historically, when there was a time when millions of people converted to Islam and then to Sikhism and then to Christianity. And there was not that anxiety at that time when they converted, because at that time government was still an empire. It was a question of riding an army into the capital and taking the throne. You didn't have talk of representation, and there wasn't this anxiety about demography. So there's this amazing quote of Pule's where, like today, the Hindutva writing of history has to do with the desecration of temples by the Muslims. Then the liberals reply saying, oh, they didn't desecrate or whatever. But Pule says, good, they desecrated. They broke the idols, they broke the temple, and they made us equal. They invited us to sit at the table and eat with them. So there were very different approaches to this, and the anxiety over these conversions started much, much later. The second question was
about the
that's a very good question and a complicated question, and all I can say is read the book, because I really have written quite a lot about it, and primarily because I myself over the last 15 years have been so involved in so much of this. So it was something that troubled me and something that I grappled with, and it will take a bit of explaining, and since I've already written it. And the last question was about whether in the introduction I took into account the movements of the time. Am I right? Is that what you're asking? Yeah, that's what the whole thing is about. Trying to place it in a political and historical context, because the text and the annotations are there to explain the text and so on. So the Annihilation of Caste in itself starts. It was a speech to which Gandhi replied, and Gandhi's reply is published, and that debate is published in the text. So I started off by looking at that debate and then went back in time to see how it all began. And of course, there's a lot of how caste exists and plays out in our contemporary democracy, in our contemporary economy also. I hope that answers your question. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arundhati, thank you, Suryakant, thank you, Father Fraser, and thank you everybody who has turned up here. Special thanks to my friends. I don't want to name them, they will let me put up this banner and put this thing up. Thanks to Salim Sabuwala and to all those people who want to join the battle for reclamation of human personality. That is what Ambedkar called the battle against caste. And revolutions can begin with a reading, so please read Annihilation of Caste. Thank you.